Welcome back to another Talklets conversation. This is going to be one of those conversations that you don't want to hear from, but it's a conversation that's much needed. It's going to be one of those conversations that talks about this flesh that we live in, to talk about this body, and you know how we are when we talk about our body. It's like, this is my body, and I can do what I want with my body. And of course you can. And that's probably why your body's in trouble right now. That's why you've had all the issues that you're dealing with right now. There's a songwriter who penned a song that says, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. He says, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And when you go back and think about what he's saying, he's saying that I planned this, I made this happen because before I went to bed last night, I had heavenly thoughts. I had good thoughts. I had thoughts about Jesus. I had spiritual thoughts. I didn't give myself to crazy stuff. I gave myself to stuff that would feed me as I read my Bible, as I prayed before I went to bed. And so I got a good night's sleep. And so I woke up this morning carefree. I woke up this morning feeling fully rested, ready to take on the world because I made up in my mind, that I would keep my mind stayed on the things of Jesus. Now, some of you, just me and you, let's just be honest. When you went to bed last night, more than likely you had nightmares because of all the stuff that you allow to be poured into you, all the things that you watch, all the things that you read, all the things that's watching you and reading you, all that stuff is inside of you. And that's something you're going to have to deal with because it's a better place, it's a better space if you put your minds on heavenly things before you rest, before you lay down. If you really focus on those things of God, you get some good night rest. But you wake up in the morning and you have a headache. You're frustrated, you're restless, you're tired, you're broken. When you wake up in the morning, you just wonder where the hours go. As a matter of fact, you're anxious throughout the night because you know you're going to have to wake up soon. And with all those nightmares and all that stuff going through your mind, let's be for real. You're giving more time to fleshly things than spiritual things. So when you wake up, here we go. You're ready to fight the world. You're not ready to conquer the world. You're ready to fight the world and to be in a fight with whoever ticks you off that day. That's where we are, though. That's where we're living. We're living between the wedges of an arm wrestle, if you will, between your spirit and your flesh. And somewhere you have to make up a decision. Are you going to feed your flesh more than you feed your spirit? Or are you going to feed your spirit more than you feed your flesh? Some of you are feeding your flesh like you pay tithes. You know, you're supposed to pay 10%, but you give. You just give whatever. But you keep 90%. Well, you probably keep 95, 98%. Some of you keep the whole 100%. That's where you're feeding your flesh and your spirit. Some of you are giving your spirit, let's just say 10%. And you're feeding your flesh 90%. That's a bad deal. That's a bad situation about to happen. That's why when you wake up in the morning and your mind ain't stayed on Jesus, your mind is stayed on your flesh because you're feeding your flesh. And your flesh, let's be for real, your flesh is not feeding you. As a matter of fact, your flesh is bleeding you. It's not feeding you. Now, your spirit fills you. It feeds you. But if you don't feed it, how's it going to feed you? You have a cup, if you will, of the Holy Spirit inside of you, and it's probably on empty. It's probably got that 5%, that 2%, that you're putting into it. And that's what you want to offer to God. You got to be kidding me. And you're giving this flesh 98% of all of you. And this flesh is going back to the dust. It's amazing. This flesh knows where it's going. It has a reality check within itself. It knows that it has an expiration date. But you're acting like you don't. You're acting like this flesh is going to live forever. And so you're feeding it versus feeding your spirit. I'm telling you, we have a problem. In the book of Matthew, chapter 26, around verse 38, 39, 40, 41, We see Jesus going into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's going off to pray. And he asks his disciples to wait for a moment and to pray with him. And when he comes back, he finds them sleeping. That's like you and I. Jesus finds us sleeping. See, that's where you're feeding your flesh. When things are not going your way, it's because you're feeding your flesh. That's what's happening. Jesus makes a statement. You mean you guys couldn't wait? You couldn't stay up for 1 hour? How many of you can pray for 1 hour? Just asking a question. Think about it for a moment. How long do you pray when you pray? I'm not saying you got to pray for an hour. I mean, some of you need to pray for 8 hours straight. Some of you can pray for 8 minutes for all I know. I mean, I don't know. That's not my question. My question is, have you ever prayed for an hour? Jesus was telling the disciples they couldn't stay awake for an hour. And so if they couldn't stay awake, and these are men of God, these are disciples, these are men running with Jesus. I mean, these are men in the church who you would think could pray all night long. But they're sleeping, they're fast asleep because they've given so much attention to this flesh like you and I. And that's why we don't pray. That's why we don't do devotion. That's why we don't read. That's why some of you don't study. That's why some of you don't go to church, because you're busy allowing this flesh to feast. And you've got your spirit on a sabbatical. You got your spirit, man, on a fast. It's what you have them on. Jesus tells them in verse 41, watch and pray. Listen to that. Watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. How many of you can be honest with yourself and just say that you stopped watching a long time ago? Yeah. You stopped praying a long time ago, and that you've fallen into temptation time and time again. See, this flesh desires to commit suicide. That's a big word for you, I know. This flesh, yeah, it desires to take you out. This flesh, yeah, it desires to beat you down. This flesh, it has its own plan. And you're feeding into it by not praying and by not watching. You're falling into temptation. And then Jesus goes on to say the spirit is willing. Yeah, your spirit, that little 10% inside of you, that little empty cup, it's willing, but the flesh is weak. It's saying everything in you that's failing, everything around you that's failing, that's not increasing and moving forward, it's because you've depleted it. It's because this flesh, you're making it swell up. You're making it bigger than your spirit. So really, when the flesh swells, that means it's weak. Do you realize this? It needs to decrease so that your spirit can be strong, can be wise, can be vibrant. But when you see it puffing up, it means there's a weakness around. Yeah. Whenever you find yourself what we call smelling yourself, it's because you've allowed this thing to puff up. You know what this flesh reminds me of? It reminds me of teenage girls on spring break going wild. See, this flesh wants to do everything and anything, and it don't care where it takes your spirit. I mean, it takes it places it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't go, and it shouldn't see. It just moves, and that's where we are. This flesh, your flesh, desires to commit suicide. It desires to quit on you. This flesh does. It wants to squeeze out your spirit is what it's trying to do. It's like an arm wrestle. I'm telling you, it's like your flesh and your spirit are wrestling. It's like Jacob wrestling with the Lord. He said, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Well, your flesh is making a statement that I want your spirit to go and to stay gone. So it's wrestling with it. It's trying to get you to say, hey, let it go. Let that go. I mean, it's just a small percentage inside of you anyway. Wow. That's where we are. So suicide's a big word. It's a very sensitive word because suicide means death caused by an injury to oneself with intention to die. And I've been told that it's a better term to use going forward. You know, we normally say somebody committed suicide, but really I guess the more universal term, if you will, the more polite political term is to use, it says died by suicide. Because when people commit suicide, they're not in the right frame of mind, if you will. They don't have the capacity to make a commitment in those moments. So I decided to start using the term that they died by suicide. We are commanded to love the Lord thy God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's like 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. And we still keep giving him less than 10%. We want all the things in our life to just line up and to just be blessed and to be pleasant. I think it's Jensen Franklin made the statement, conquer the temptation to give up. People who commit suicide normally leave a letter, if you will. And in the letter, they kind of tell some things to people who are important to them. But we are committing suicide without writing a letter, as far as, with a pen. When you look at your unhealthy lifestyle, your unhealthy eating habits, when you look at your poor choices, when you look at drug abuse and alcohol abuse and financial abuse, when you just look at all the things we're doing, we're writing a letter. It's just not with ink. It's with self-gratification. It's with greed. It's with gluttony. I mean, even Apostle Paul comes to a point where he makes a statement that when I want to do good, evil is always present. I mean, the things that I want to do, the things that I should do, I do not. But the things that I shouldn't do, that's the thing that I do. He says, evil makes me do it, and it makes me continue to do it. It's not like it's just a one-time thing. Once you give yourself to your flesh, I mean, your flesh stands up. It wants to ride you. Yeah. Some of you be saying, the devil made me do it. No, 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 no. Your flesh made you do it because you're feeding it and you're not feeding your spirit. You allowed your flesh to use you as a host, and it's taking you to places and doing things with you. I mean, you know what it's doing. I mean, I can't tell you what it's doing to you, but it's doing things to you. Some of you go into strip clubs. Some of you going to parties and stuff where it's just crazy parties with nudity and everything else involved. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all have issues that we have to deal with. Everybody wants to look pretty, to be beautiful, to look fine, to have a fit body, and I'm good with that. I'm serious. I am good with that. But we give so much attention to this flesh, and we start reverencing it. We start honoring it. We start glorifying it. That's the problem. And I told you, when you start doing that stuff, you allow the devil to use your body as a host, to implant himself, because he realizes that there's nothing inside of you to keep him out. You're empty. You're on void. And so he sees, hey, you got an opening, so let me come in and have my place. You're giving so much attention to this body, but that's what he sees. Yeah. He don't see anything that you can to keep him out with, because he realizes it's your cup. Yeah, your cup that you used to have that should be running over, the cup is dry. That cup is depleted. Some of you are so much into your body, showing every print that you have on your body, male and female. You can't help yourself for buying. Everything you buy is tight, it's revealing. Nothing you have is concealing. See, that's the modern day thing, is to reveal. The old traditional thing was to conceal. No one's concealing anymore because everybody is competing. And so I'm going to show you every print I have so that you can already see what you're going to get. And that's where we are. We're no longer in the spirit. We're just in this flesh. We look at the package and not the product inside the package. It's like they have those baby reveals, how they bust open the confetti and it's pink or it's blue if it's a girl or it's a boy. Well, that's what we have now. We have a cultural reveal. That's what we have. You do realize that there's nothing good in this flesh. Nothing. This flesh, when you look at the works of this flesh, it's all about idolatry. It's about lasciviousness. It's about hate. It's about rudeness. It's about bitterness. I mean, it's about all the things that's negative. Idolatry. Just think about it. But when you look at the fruits of the Spirit, and that's why I don't get it, why we're not serving the fruits of the Spirit itself, because it's all about love, peace, and joy, long-suffering, gentleness, kindness, goodness, faith. That's what it's about. Now, why are you serving something that's totally against that? I mean, you're serving this flesh is full of witchcraft and sorcery. That's all it can hold. And it knows it, though. And it's trying to make you check out, sell out to it. If Adam and Eve could have a do-over, or wouldn't they have a do-over? And once they served the Spirit and not the flesh. But when they sinned in the garden, when they became disobedient, deceived, distracted, however you want to put it, they started serving the flesh. That's why they knew they were naked. They realized that, boy, something's wrong with this. They had never seen themselves being nasty, being ugly before. Because, see, that's what this flesh is in God's eyes. It's ugly. It's nasty. Isn't it something that we see something so different than God? God sees this as nasty. As a matter of fact, God says, take off your shoes. Don't walk up here with that stuff on. God makes it clear how nasty this thing is. And we're trying to honor it. We're trying to puff it up and celebrate it. We're all addicted to it and chasing it. I mean, just look at your eyes, where your eyes roam when the fleshly body walks by. I mean, you're trying to see what's all concealed inside of it. some of you, because you don't have to see too much because it's all revealed. But that's where we are. We're living in a time, we're living in a space where the spirit is being squeezed out. It's being suffocated. I'm telling you, if Adam and Eve could have a do-over, they love to go back and be in that spirit realm, that place, that safe place where they were, and not into this flesh. But we picked up their bad habits. You think we'd learn from them, and we wouldn't even want to touch anything that they touch because we realize that they just messed it all up for us. And we all talk about it. Boy, Eve just messed it up, her and Adam. But then we're doing the same thing they did. We're living in this flesh and we're celebrating this flesh. I mean, you do realize that sin entered in, and sin is just simply, it's like a sip of cyanide. The more you sin, the more sips you're taking. We all know this body is going back to the dust. We all know that. But some of you are speeding it up. You're rushing it up. You don't want to be in that space. You don't want to be in that space. I know. You want to look sexy and attractive, and I know this is your body. And hey, don't get me wrong. You got to do what you got to do. But there's going to come a day where you're going to be asked a question, where you're going to be judged. There's going to come a day of accountability where your spirit needs to stand up for you and give an account on your behalf of all the things that you've achieved, all the things that you did, how close you were to God. See, some of you are condemning yourself and because you're just so caught up into trying to make sure that this flesh, if you will, or this body or your spirit, you're trying to make sure that you're perfect, I think is the best way to put it. And you don't have to be perfect, but you're restraining yourself. You got everything up under you and you're trying to suppress it, and you can't wear this and you can't wear that, and you're so judgmental. Let me tell you something. You don't have to restrain yourself if you just stay close to God. See, that's your problem. You're not close to God, so you're trying to find things to help you out, things that you feel good about yourself because someone else is doing it, so you're pointing out their flaws. No, stop that foolishness. Just start living for God. You don't have to do anything if you live for God. Because guess what? Because you're going to be so close to him. You're going to walk like him. You're going to talk like him. You're going to see like him. You're going to understand the stuff that you shouldn't be doing. But don't put someone else down to make you feel good, please. That's what Satan does, see? Satan wants you to condemn yourself. He wants you to see what I call look-back moments, or have look-back moments. You know what look-back moments are? It's where you look back at stuff you did back then that messed you up. But you had a little pleasure in it. And so you find yourself, well, hold up, let me just go back and try some of that again. See, those are look-back moments. You don't want those. You want reflective moments. Because see, reflective will let you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. It shows you all the things that you should see. And guess what you do? You keep it moving. You realize I'm not going back there. Nothing wrong with being reflective. All the things in this world that's innovative, creative, all the gifts, all the things that are blessings on this earth comes out of the spirit realm. Satan ain't giving you nothing. Satan ain't trying to give you nothing. He ain't trying to boast you up. He ain't got nothing to boast you up for. But all this creative stuff you see, it's God. God created the heavens and the earth. Who you think is giving you the ability to be innovative, creative, to think the way you think? Now, hold up. Some of you got some stinking thinking. Your thoughts are messed up because you're so tied to this flesh. I'm talking about those of you who have a sense to understand your spirit needs to grow. It needs to glow. It needs to be the best thing happening. It don't need to be on a fast, your spirit. It don't need to be in a shut-in. It don't need to be shut out. It don't need to be on a sabbatical. It needs to be increasing. Your spirit does. Your flesh needs to be tied to a flash, to a sabbatical. It needs to be condemned. Your flesh does, but not your spirit. Let your spirit eat and grow. Feed it. Yeah, feed it those things that it really desires and needs, because it's going to feed you. Yeah, we live in this fleshly body. I get it. It's all fine and handsome and sexy and you like it. But really and truly, the most beautiful thing inside of you is your spirit. Yes, I know. We're so tied into the outside package. I get it. We all are. And we forget about the product inside the package. I pray you realize the Holy Spirit is inside you. And it needs to be revealed, not concealed. Yeah, it needs to be covering you. You need to be adorning yourself in it. Every time you've condemned yourself, it's because you allowed yourself to be played. Because all Satan wants to do is dirty you up so he can keep you in condemnation, so he can keep you suppressed. That's what condemnation does. He don't want you moving forward, increasing, believing, having hope. Yes. He don't want you walking through this earthly realm with smiles and full of joy. And that's what you need to be. Stop having look-back moments of condemnation and start just having reflective moments and keep stepping forward. your flesh will betray you. That's why I told you your flesh desires to commit suicide, because suicide kills your future. It kills your legacy. It kills your lineage. It removes every trace of your existence. That's what suicide does. It stops your family from connecting the dots. It removes the breadcrumbs of your identity. That's what it does. And I'm telling you now, you need to remove what I call that bridge, not the glory, but that bridge, that bad bridge. Yes, that bridge that is going nowhere. Keep the glory intact and build your story on the building blocks of your success and happiness for your family. Your spirit should be allowed to glow and to grow and to feast because of what you're feeding it. And your flesh should be able to live out its entire existence until its expiration date. Because you're feeding it for what you need to do to nourish this body, if you will, that your spirit is living within. But don't ever try to give it all the glory. Don't ever try to honor it, reverence it. It has its proper place. I pray that through understanding of this conversation, you understand that your flesh desires to wipe you out, wipe out your spirit. That's what it's really trying to do. I pray that you put it in check. You allow it to exist only for God's glory, and you be blessed.